Keep right with Ralph K. Ginorio. Asylum for Afrikaners? Yes. Afrikaners and other Caucasian South Africans have just been offered the opportunity to legally come here to the United States as asylum seekers by President Donald J. Trump. This is long past due. These people have been openly targeted for an anarchic genocide by politicians across the South African spectrum, including President Cyril Ramaphosa. The economic freedom fighters leader, Julius Malema, famously sings at his rallies in one translation of their race war ballad, Dubul, ibhunu, my bad translation, "Kill the Boer, kill the white farmer, Brrrrrr-pah!" That's a machine gun noise. "Kill their wives, kill their kids, kill their dogs, kill their cats, kill the Boer, the white farmer, Brrrrrr-pah!" Before the death of President Nelson Mandela in 2014, the legal rights and protections for white South Africans have melted away. Whites live in walled-off compounds surmounted with razor wire, in homes with internal gates intended to slow down attackers and give defenders a chance of protecting themselves and their families. Sometimes these measures even work. Attacks are so routine that white families must travel to shop for basic necessities in armed caravans. When they get to the store, it's more likely that the stores have been already looted. Whites are robbed, raped, and murdered in their homes, on the streets, in the stores, and anywhere else where human beings congregate. Non-convoying vehicles are taken by armed gangs who occasionally allow the travelers to survive the immediate aftermath of the attack. Agencies of the law do not even protect black South Africans who are unaffiliated with powerful patrons. Whole tribes of black South Africans are openly persecuted by their government, as are the descendants of Asian Indians living in South Africa. South African law, though, has long been weaponized, quite particularly against whites. It is almost unheard of for police to arrest anyone involved in crimes against this group. Instead, for over a decade, the law is merely one more method used by various black leaders to despoil whites of any property they still may own. Electricity only occasionally flows at random times each week. The power grid, along with roads, bridges, clean water systems, waste and sewer systems, hospitals, food and medical supply chains, and even just the modern buildings themselves, have all been deteriorating for decades. Unless a person has high political connections in South Africa, nothing works. But whites are openly and specifically targeted for a genocide more chaotic than Hitler's final solution. Instead of an orderly deportation to death camps, criminals in South Africa are simply encouraged by their leaders to prey upon white families in attacks of opportunity until there are none left. Yet Americans and Europeans, who themselves unselfconsciously describe themselves as the most tolerant, just, and sensitive among us, are unified in opposing this mercy that Trump offers, a way for whites out of South Africa. Left-wing and woke, our social justice warriors, decry allowing Caucasian South Africans into our country because they claim these are white supremacists. To these leftist activists, the very thought that people whose lineage originated in Europe could possibly be at the risk of racialized genocide is simply unthinkable. Many of these leftists have publicly asserted that racism is unique to white people, that though only white people can be racists. The left's theories of structural racism require that they condemn all Caucasians as predators. They have even accused white babies of being instinctive white supremacists. The United States is, of course, to them, irredeemably racist. These leftists, communists really, damn all that is associated with the age of European exploration and imperialism, from before Christopher Columbus's journey in 1492 to after F.W. de Klerk's term of office as President of South Africa in 1994. In their warped view of history, the only important part of South Africa's history is the apartheid regime from 1948 through 1994. To be sure, the racial caste system that was apartheid was worse than Jim Crow and nearly as odious as the chattel slavery of blacks in the American antebellum South. However, South African history has much more of significance than this, one 45-year period. Even the history of Dutch Afrikaner settlers goes back to the year 1600. Is it fair to condemn apartheid? Hell yes! But it is not the only history that shapes today's South Africa. Also, against all odds, apartheid Afrikaner President F.W. de Klerk negotiated the peaceful transfer of power to the black majority in the early 1990s. As the Soviets fell, apartheid was dismantled willingly by the Afrikaners themselves. This need not have happened. In the early 1990s, South Africa had nuclear weapons as well as the dominant military south of the Sahara. Had the bitter-einder irreconcilable faction won out over de Klerk, a bloody civil war that included likely nuclear detonations would have been needed to end apartheid. Instead, de Klerk peaceably handed over power to newly elected former political prisoner Nelson Mandela. For 20 years, Mandela maintained the only sub-Saharan first world society in all of Africa. He did so by protecting the civil and property rights of South Africans of all colors. This was all ended by Mandela's avaricious successors, who tantalized their followers with promises of despoiling white property and destroying the white presence in South Africa utterly. Mandela's policy of reconciliation has become Ramaphosa's policy of revenge. Afrikaner and other Caucasian South Africans are being slowly exterminated. They have been for some time. Yet until Trump, the rest of the world looked on with either relish or indifference. Today's whites have been left to pay for the sins of their ancestors. This attitude of indifference came about because the West has long been schooled in the left's narrative of critical race theory and diversity, equity, inclusion, which has replaced anti-black bigotry with white guilt and anti-white discrimination. In such an environment, expressing public compassion for today's South African victims comes with the risk of being called an apartheid-loving racist. We in the West must free ourselves from those who would bully us into spectating at today's genocides in South Africa, in Xinjiang, and in Tibet, and elsewhere. We must stand bravely against the left's version of racial hatred. We should each consider whether we personally will actively help those who, like President Trump, are trying to save the lives of men, women, and children from politically expedient extermination. Thank you for your time.